Good morning, everybody. How are you doing today? We are finally done with the second exam. How does it feel to be done with the second exam? Is everybody excited? I know, right? We are halfway done with this class. I know, right? We are halfway done with this class. I thought I set my sound so it was going to be off, but I guess I didn't do that. So, I know every time, Tara, I can't help it. So, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the second exam and some dates coming up. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to the whiteboard real quick. Okay, so exam two, we had 188 students in this class at this point. We had 59 A's, 47 B's, and 50 C's. So over 150 of you made A, B, or C. We had 23 of you below C level. And what's most disappointing to me is the 9 of you who did not complete midterm number 2. I do not want to give out zeros. So please, please, please contact me and let's work something out so that you don't have to take a zero on midterm number 2. By the way, if you took a zero on midterm number 1, please call me and we'll work something out about that as well. I do not want to give anyone a zero. Speaking of zeros and grades, in a couple of weeks, you're going to have to make an important decision in some of your classes. October 26th is the last day to drop with a grade of W. Okay, so if you're running close to the attendance limit on a class and you think you're going to go over, if you go over that attendance limit after October the 26th, they will kick you out of class and give you a WF. All right, which is a very, very bad grade. If you drop out before October 26, you get a W, which is not great for your grade, but it doesn't bring your GPA down. As a general rule, you do not want to withdraw from a lot of classes. Even though they don't count against your GPA, colleges will see your transcript. And if they see a ton of W's, that means that you're the kind of person that can't finish something that you start. They're not going to like that. But if you have one of those classes where maybe you got sick or something happened and you're close to the attendance limit and you think you may need to drop that class, please do that before October 26. All right. Any questions about that? Just wanted to give you a little bit of knowledge there. On my birthday, I'm going to drop all classes as a gift to you. You know what? I promise you we're going to remember your birthday, Riley C. We wouldn't. In fact, I promise you we're going to sing to you and I'll even have a cake on your birthday, okay? So don't you worry about it. Good morning, Adnek. Good to see you. And good morning to the rest of you who came in, who said hello that I did not greet. Thanks for coming to class today. I do appreciate it. Yes, and I will eat it without you, of course. Actually, maybe I'll send you a virtual slice. So today we're going to talk about Chapter 9. Chapter 9 can be subdivided into two parts, motivation and emotion. We're going to talk a little bit about motivation. Tomorrow is Etta's birthday. Fantastic. Happy birthday, Etta. Remind me to sing you happy birthday tomorrow, okay? I have a fabulous voice. You're too old to celebrate. What are you, almost 30 now? You're still so young. And that's a guess. Thank you. 34, right? Oh, you're still young in my book, so don't feel too bad. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started on the lecture today. All right, so Last week we were talking about humans versus computers, and I suggested to you that the computer was a great model for how the brain works. And in fact, you can use that computer and take that analogy out and really start to understand the human mind from an information processing experience. There is, however, one thing that differentiates humans from computers, and that is the idea of motivations and emotions. So these are the activators that cause us to choose certain behavior patterns and certain activities and certain environments. Why do we do the things we do? Now you'll notice if you have a laptop and you sit it right there, as long as you do not ask your laptop to do anything, your laptop will not do anything. Computers have no motivation at all. They follow directions. Human beings, on the other hand, have preferences, desires, feelings, and all of these emotional things that drive us one way or the other. So chapter 9 is all about the emotions and motivations that affect human functioning. Okay. So, your book talks a little bit about theories of motivations. And actually, we already talked about one theory of motivation when we were talking about the behaviorist school of thought. The behaviorists asked the question, why do people do the things they do? And their explanation was that the environment provided incentives and punishments. So you can think about behaviorism as one form of motivational theory. So people do certain things to achieve reinforcements and to avoid punishments. People have certain feelings because they have certain environmental things associated with reflex responses. So one way to think about motivations is from the incentive perspective. But let's take that idea of motivation and why people do things and let's move it a little bit outside of this incentive theories. And so what we're going to talk about today are three broad theories of human motivation. We're going to talk about the satisfaction of needs theories. We're going to talk about drive reduction theory, and we're going to talk about optimal level of arousal. Okay? So, the first thing we'll talk about, motivation has been studied in response to certain physiological behaviors such as eating, drinking, and other sort of physiological maintenance behaviors. And one way to think about motivation is it's a drive to achieve homeostasis. When you don't have oxygen, you breathe to increase the oxygen level in your brain. When you're hungry, you eat food to reduce that need. And when you are thirsty, you drink water and it makes the thirst go away. So the idea here is that we have sort of a balanced need for what you might call oxygen, food, and water. And if you'll remember, I talked to you about that little area in your medulla, which is responsible for breathing. It monitors your oxygen rate. And when your oxygen level goes down too low, your medulla, during its sleep at night, wakes you up so that you take a breath, thereby increasing your oxygen level. If you remember, we talked about a sleep-related disorder that's related to breathing. Can somebody remind me of that sleep-related disorder we talked about last week? Or, excuse me, a month ago? What's that sleep-related disorder? Where you wake up and take a gulp of air, sleep apnea. Absolutely. So in describing that, I didn't really mention it, but what I was talking about was a homeostatic model of O2 level balance in your brain. So you can think of drive reduction as a need to restore homeostasis brought about by having some physiological quality in your body get out of balance. Okay, now we study that with regard to hunger in people's eating behavior, because you do know that sometimes people have eating related disorders that cause them to either gain weight or not have enough weight. And so one of the areas where psychologists are interested in is the physiological processes that govern the hunger response. So it's a demonstration of drive reduction and homeostasis as well. Now, the brain area that's responsible for hunger and actually all motivated behavior we mentioned in for exam 1 was the hypothalamus. Okay, so it regulates all of these drives: your hunger, your thirst, your drive for sex. If you can go to the Betty Ford addiction clinic for it, it is probably governed by your hypothalamus. And in fact, research has shown that damage to the ventromedial hypothalamus, the middle underneath part of the hypothalamus, leads to crazed overeating in mice, and they call that hyperphagia. Is eating uncontrollably. So damage to the hypothalamus can even wreck your motivational balance, causing you to overeat. Now, your book talks about several hormones that are related to this homeostatic process. Remember when we talked about hormones in chapter 2? I suggested to you that they have neurological effects just like neurotransmitters, but instead of being secreted locally and acting locally, they are secreted and act globally. All right? So hormones related to the hunger homeostatic condition: glucose, ghrelin, and leptin. Your book is going to talk about these three hormones in your body. So glucose is blood sugar, and it's the gas that runs your engine. Low levels of glucose lead to short-term hunger signals. They also lead to crabbiness as well. If you've ever been hungry, you've probably been crabby and you don't think as well. So low glucose levels do provide a short-term hunger signal. It turns out that when your stomach is empty, it secretes this hormone ghrelin, which also causes a short-term hunger signal. So low levels of glucose or high levels of ghrelin both lead to a short-term hunger signal that's interpreted by your hypothalamus. And leptin is actually released from fat cells as you store food. And so it works the opposite way. It inhibits the hunger response. So we've actually got these three hormones that serve to maintain a balance of this hunger response that we feel. So one way you can think about humans as being driven is by this physiological need to maintain balance. All right, so that's two different theories of motivation. Why do people do the things they do? Well, the behaviorists would say it's because we have these environmental forces that shape our behavior. However, biopsychologists have found that human beings have these mechanical processes in place, these hormone processes in place that try to achieve a certain physiological balance. Hangry. Okay, I'm sorry. I just looked down at my comments. Hangry. I think that's that might be a scientific term. But if you look right underneath me, this is all you'll need to know for the exam. Just focus on this little learning tip here. The questions would probably be multiple choice, asking you about these different hormones related to the process of hunger. Okay, now here's sort of what motivates me. Your book's going to talk about another motivational theory called optimal arousal. How many of you have ever been overwhelmed and had too many things on your plate? Anybody had that experience? Please raise your hand. I'm sure some of you constantly overwhelmed. There we go. Okay. Here you go. How many of you have ever been bored stiff before? Oh my God, I wish I had something to do. Anybody had that experience? Okay, so Chris has been, okay, So, most of you have been overwhelmed and most of you have been bored. And neither one of these states of awareness is very interesting. Instead, I would argue that all of you want to maintain what we will call an optimal level of arousal, which is somewhere between being overwhelmed and somewhere between being bored stiff. We have this optimal level of arousal. Think of this optimal level of arousal as occurring because of activation of the amygdala, our emotion center, and the cascade of cortisol that we might feel. So in a sense, we all want to maintain a certain level of arousal. Too much amygdala activity and cortisol, we don't like. Not enough amygdala and cortisol activity, we don't like that as well. So one way to think about human beings is human beings try to maintain what we will call an optimal level of arousal. Now, this is kind of interesting because there is research to suggest that sociopaths, okay, people with antisocial personality disorders that break those laws and sometimes hurt people, steal things, and have no empathy for other people, there is research to suggest that their brains are different than ours and that the kinds of things that stimulate you and I do not provide stimulation for them. Okay, now if anybody's interested in this, I would suggest you watch a really crazy documentary called The Dangerous Few. I just typed it in the chat bar right here. And this is a documentary that follows a couple of children who are diagnosed as sociopaths at the age of 5 or 6. And what the upshot of this film is that some researchers believe that using brain scans, you can see those children who are at risk as adults of growing up to be sociopaths. The things that would terrify you and I, like hurting somebody or robbing a bank, seem to stimulate their brains in a certain way that they can't achieve otherwise. Does that make sense? Have I lost the audience? Nobody's commented in a minute. I hope that doesn't mean I've lost the audience. Now, yes, I have lost you. Makes sense. Okay, good enough. Fantastic. Now, optimal arousal is also used in sports psychology as well. And there's this law, the Yerkes-Dodson law, that says that people perform best when they're at an optimal level of arousal. If you're too bored, if you don't care, you're not going to study for Psych 150, and you're not going to make a very good exam grade because you're not going to be prepared for doing well. On the other hand, some of you have been so neurotic and so nervous and so uptight that you can't think straight on the exam, right? So you can be sometimes too aroused or not aroused enough to perform well. And what Yerkes-Dodson found was there appears to be an optimal level of arousal for performance. And what you want to do as a sports psychologist is help your athletes maintain the proper level of arousal. Now, it turns out most professional athletes are really motivated, so you don't have to worry too much about the low end of the spectrum. Where sports psychologists really work is by helping sports athletes maintain moderate levels of arousal. If you've ever performed in front of 50,000 people, it can be quite nerve-wracking. I remember playing golf one time and there were 20 people on the tee box. It was a tournament and there were 20 people watching me hit my first golf shot, and I like to died. I got so nervous, right? So one of the things that sports psychologists do a lot of times is help their athletes lower their level of arousal so that hyperarousal doesn't ruin their ability for fine motor movements. All right. Now, the neat thing is, depending upon the sports, you want more or less arousal. I was watching football last night. If you're a lineman down there, the behavior is pretty simple. You fire off the line and you try to drive that 300-pound guy that way, and he drives off the line and tries to drive you that way. And it's a pretty simple behavior. So you want a high level of arousal there. But if you've ever played golf or shot pool, those are very, very small, fine behaviors that you engage in with the fine motor movements. And they require you to be less aroused in order to perform well. And so depending upon the sport, the optimal level of, and the person, the optimal level of arousal is going to change. Did I say sociopaths, psychopaths? Excuse me. Uh, Psychopathy, sociopath, antisocial personality. Those are going to be similar terms, if you will. Now, but when I was young, I played my piano very easily. Wow, right. And you know, it's interesting, Riley, when we talk about the cognitive behavioral perspective, maybe 2 or 3 bad concert recitals or some anxiety in another area can bleed into your performance and ability to perform in front of people. It is weird, right? And it might have to do with the growth in the frontal lobe and your ability to think about yourself as an object. Typically, kids are less focused on who they are as an individual, their identity. And so maybe you're not as concerned about the judgment that people are making of you. That's kind of interesting. I never really thought about changing arousal as a function of age. That's a really good idea and sounds like a topic for a dissertation if any of you want to get your own PhD. Okay. Now, so that's sort of a sports psychology application. So we've got 2 different I take that back. 3 different applications of motivational theory. The behaviorists would say it's all about the environment and try to achieve incentives while avoiding punishments. So that's one motivational theory. Then I suggested to you that we had, goodness me, this homeostatic need to maintain a balance. And researchers who've looked at the hypothalamus and sort of physiological maintenance have looked at motivation from a homeostatic perspective. Then sports psychologists looked at motivation in terms of having too much or too little motivation, and they focused on what we would call optimal arousal. Now, there's another tradition in psychology that was pioneered by Sigmund Freud. In fact, I probably should have talked about this one first. And these people argue that human beings have deep down desires built into their system, and that these deep down desires drive our behavior. Okay, the first group of people to talk about this were the psychoanalysts, and they were championed by a fellow named Sigmund Freud. And when we get to chapter 13 and I talk about Sigmund Freud, what I'm going to argue to you is that he argued that we all have this instinctual need for sex, a biological predisposition for sex. If you think about it, it makes sense. If the animal doesn't want to have sex and procreate, then there won't be more of that animal. So he argued that deep down inside of us, we all had this need for sexual gratification. And he argued that all of our behavior is driven by the need to manage this desire for sex. He argued that we identify with our father, and in order to maintain our sexual identity. He argued that if we can't get sex, we redirect that energy out, and we build things and do great things because we have to sublimate this sexual impulse. Sigmund Freud is quite interesting, Etta. And so he argues that sex is sort of the primary fundamental human motivation. And you know what? He might be right. He might be right. Now, there were other psychoanalysts, and they were just like Freud, and they believed that people had fundamental human motivations, but they differed in the motivations that they thought were important. So Alfred Adler, probably one of Freud's oldest colleagues, thought that people were driven by feelings of inferiority and by a need to become powerful and develop feelings of superiority. He argued that infants are so helpless that the first feelings we have are of being helpless. And he argues our whole life is spent fighting these infant feelings of helplessness that we have. And this is why people do good things and show off, is to demonstrate their feelings of power. Anybody ever heard of the term inferiority complex before? Anybody ever heard that term, inferiority complex? Has anybody ever heard of overcompensation? You know, we make jokes about men who buy fancy cars by saying they're making up for what? Absolutely. Little man syndrome, Ashley. You are quite right. And so overcompensation and inferiority complex are terms coined by Alfred Adler to describe this need for superiority that some people have. And then there was a lady named Karen Horney, who was very instrumental in what we might call codependency. And she argued that human beings actually are looking for security. If you look at infants, they need that security and that love. We talked about attachment in chapter 4. She argued that that attachment isn't something that happens once. It's a fundamental need that follows us throughout our entire life. And so these are sort of fundamental motivations that psychoanalysts argued were just built in the fiber of humans. What do you think? Which of these is the drive for humans? If you had to pick one, which of these drives human beings? Is it the need for sex, the need for power, or the need for security? What do you think, folks? Or what do you think the correct answer is? There you go, all of the above. Maya says power. Can it be? You know what? Yes, 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 yes. You folks are perfect, perfect, perfect. You're getting exactly the point I'm trying to make, all right? Because there's a fellow named Abraham Maslow. Anybody ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Abraham Maslow came to the same intuitive conclusion that you folks all had, that you know what? It's not just one drive, one need that people have. People actually have lots of different needs, but some needs are more important if they haven't been met yet. And so he argues that you can think about human beings as having different needs based upon the kind of environment that they actually happen to be in. So he argued, you know what? We do have these primordial physiological needs, just like the people in the homeostatic tradition would argue. We have the need for food, water, warmth, oxygen, and sleep. And just like these homeostatic people argued, he would say that all we have to do is meet these needs. We don't need more food than we can eat. We just need enough food to keep us from being hungry. We need just enough water to keep us from being thirsty. We need just enough warmth to keep us from being cold. You folks have been in a room that's too warm, and you can have too much of this physiological need. He argued once we have that need met, we then have other needs that become important, like these safety needs, which is what Karen Horney would argue, the need for security, the need for protection, the need for freedom from threats. So we have these security needs. Again, this is a homeostatic need, he would argue. You don't need more secure than secure. You just need to be secure. you don't need anything more than just to be protected from threats, right? So he argues that we can fulfill this need too. And he argues people who have their physiological and their safety needs may then begin to think about how they fit in with the group that they're around. And he argues that we all have this need for acceptance and friendship. Again, he argues you just need to be accepted into the group. There's no more acceptance than just being accepted, right? And so he argues that some people have this need. Now, if you have physiological needs, if you met your safety needs, if you've met your belonging needs, he argues that you probably might need to then have esteem needs. You might need to feel good about yourself. And more importantly, you might need people to feel good about you. Self-esteem and other esteem, if you will. And so he argues that we have all of these needs that have to be met. Now, he developed his theories. He's kind of weird. His theories were developed in a non-scientific vacuum. What he did was he read case histories of what he considered to be self-actualized people. People who had met all these needs and were doing amazing and special things. And he wanted to find out what was unique about these people. So he went through and read histories of prominent and awesome people to find out what it was like to be above and beyond others. And he coined this term he called self-actualization. He argued that for these people, it wasn't just about survival and meeting homeostatic needs, but it was about fulfilling one's potential and achieving personal aspirations, right? Now, I've got a video in your course resources folder about a fellow named Alex Honnold. Any of you ever read or watched the movie Free Solo? Anybody heard of that movie, Free Solo? It's out on Disney right now. Anybody heard this movie? Okay, this dude, Alex Honnold, is a free solo climber. That means he climbs cliffs without ropes or safety nets or any form of protection. All of his friends have fallen off cliffs and died. And he made it his mission to climb El Capitan, a 3,300 foot cliff that goes straight stinking up without any ropes or any protection. Okay, well, Riley, if there's I've got a 10-minute TED talk in the course in the course resources folder where he talks about his experience, and he has a 2 or 3 minute clip of him right up at the top, and he's showing the pictures, the video, because they actually had people in ropes who climbed along with him and took pictures. So if you go see the movie Free Solo or watch the movie Free Solo, you will get a first-person video of what it was like to climb up this 3,300-foot cliff with no ropes. And to be quite honest, it makes me sick really to watch the movie. I kind of get fear of heights. I get a little sick to my stomach just watching the video because it's so freaking scary. And when you ask the guy, why do you do this, man? You're playing with your life. He just feels the need to climb, and he felt the need to dominate this mountain. And there's nothing which can explain it. You know what I mean? It's not about esteem. It's not about survival or anything. And in fact, this guy lives in a van so that he can spend all his time and money climbing. He doesn't do anything but climb. Right? He is clearly a mountain goat. He does it in about, I think, 4 hours too. It's absolutely insane. Van life. Right, Ashley? Doesn't that sound kind of romantic? You know what I mean? Get rid of the house, society, everything. Just live in your van and do whatever it is that makes you feel alive. That's kind of what this guy, Alex Honnold, has done. It does sound appealing to me. Honestly, folks, I would say for me, it's all about optimal level of arousal. The reason I do all this stuff in class and I play all these games and do my video lectures is, I do it for you, but to be quite honest, I do it for me because it keeps me from getting bored. It's fun. It's what I like to do. It helps me feel self-actualized, like I'm creating things and I'm an artist. You know what I mean? And so it's really weird how sometimes we can get motivated by these things that may not make sense to other people to stimulate your arousal. It may stimulate your arousal, Etta, but it also stimulates mine. Actually, I do want to step back a little bit because your book does talk about need for achievement. There's actually a test. A fellow named Charles Murray came up with this, and he argued that some of us are built with this internal need to achieve. And anytime we have a contest, some of you have to be number one. Anytime you're in a class, you have to make the A. Some of you have a high level of need for achievement, and some of us have a lower need for achievement. Now, the reason I include this is in this satisfaction of needs, unlike Sigmund Freud, Alfred Adler, or Karen Horney's need-based theories, the need for achievement actually has a test that's developed for it. So if you'll see the picture right here below me, this is what's called a TAT, a thematic apperception test. It's a form of personality test where you supply all the information. Now, in some personality tests, it's easy to tell what the right and wrong answer is. So in the TAT, they don't give you a multiple choice or a scale item to pick. Instead, what they do is they give you a picture and have you write a story about it. And what you're going to find, you see this little boy, he's looking at a violin and he's got a frown on his face. What happens is the people who are high in need for achievement will typically write stories about how he's depressed because he's not as good on the violin as he needs to be. Okay, so in the sense, these people who take this TAT can demonstrate a high need for achievement if they talk about how this guy wants to get better at his violin. Those of you who are lower in need for achievement will say he's bored and wants to go outside and play, but his mom is making him practice. Yeah, right, Etta. I like to put in the Etta in the... Thank you. And the reason I put that stuff in is to keep you aroused at an optimal level of arousal, because that's kind of what I think should be. I don't want you to be overwhelmed. And if I made the test too hard and made you focus too hard, you might turn off on me. But at the same time, I don't want the class to be too easy. And I put things in there that keep you that are fun or keep you aroused. But you know what? I know that there are several of you who have a need for achievement. And so that's why I have the Neuromatrix game. And there are some of you that like to play that game more than others. And you watch the leaderboard every week. And you want to know, am I in first place? Am I in second place? Did I move up a place? Did I move down a spot? And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to appeal to those of you who are high in need for achievement. Right? And see, there you go. Tara gets so hyped up, she has too much arousal. So Yerkes Dodson would say, you need to mellow out, Tara, and your performance on the Kahoot will get better. Right? There you go. And Michael, he's high in need for achievement. He forgot a week and got really mad. I don't know if she's in. Oh, actually, I don't think she can come to the live class, but I will give a shout out to Joy Ratzman. She I know her from my developmental psych class. She took that class as well, and she's a hyper competitive person as well too. And so the deal with this class is sort of put in stuff that keeps you aroused and interested, put in things that are exciting for some of you, and then I even put in incentives, right? Extra credit here and there. So you can think about this psych class as using lots of different forms of motivation to keep you going, right? So, satisfying the need for achievement. I put in the neuromatrix for some of you. The optimal level of arousal. I have fun, interesting, weird videos so that you stay aroused in your mind. We have the group meetings and the webinars so that those of you who have a need for belonging and togetherness will be motivated. And then I provide you lots of extra credit points to keep you motivated here in class. So, in a sense, all of these different sort of motivational theories can come into play when we talk about why people do the things they do. Do you have any questions for me? Riley, what are your need for achievement? What kinds of needs for achievement do you have? Eda's competitive in sports. There you go. There you go. So it sounds to me like we have some high achievers in this class, that's not a bad thing, just as long as you keep it in balance, man. Don't go overboard with your need for overachievement, right? Sometimes if you need to achieve something bad enough, you won't achieve it the right way. And that's not what you want out of life. So you want to learn how to achieve things the right way, because in the end, you have to live with yourself. Any questions? So I hope you come to this week's webinar. Come tonight at 8 o'clock, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, or Thursday at 9 o'clock. We are going to be talking about emotions and more importantly, deception. How many of you think you are good liars? How many of you are bad liars? Okay, well, it turns out that you have controlled and uncontrolled emotional processes. So our emotion is composed of our frontal lobe, right, which is thoughtful, and our amygdala, which is not thoughtful. And it turns out that you can be pretty good at concealing your emotions most of the time. But if you're a professional and knows what to look for and how to spot micro expressions, you can see when people are lying to you because their body will tell on them. So we're going to talk about that tonight. I am absolutely the worst liar there ever was because I am very bad at concealing emotions. So when I'm lying, that lie just comes right out of me. It's not because I'm an honest person. I dearly want to lie. I'm just not very good at it. Right? So it's really great to see everybody today. I hope to see you tonight in webinar. Bring your beverage of choice and we will have a wonderful chat together. And if I don't see you tonight, hopefully I'll see you tomorrow in webinar. Any questions? Camilla asked a question about the neuromatrix scores. I was tabulating them right before this class. I will have these scores up by, I was going to do a video. I wanted to do another video update, but if I don't get motivated, I'll post the scores tonight, okay? So I should have them up by tonight at 9 p.m. How's that sound? All right, take care, folks. Have a great day, and I will see you later. Bye.